It's very difficult right now to determine the rioter from the protester, that the chaos that's ensued. You're a uniformed police officer and you're standing on duty. The fact that you would kneel down before protesters and rioters as a show of solidarity is a capitulation that undermines the Constitution. I'm Dr. Duke with The New American, and this is Constitution Corner. Well, at the John Birch Society and The New American magazine, we are huge supporters of local police. In fact, we actually have a program that you should look up at thejbs.org called Support Your Local Police. Find ways that you can help local police officers do their job. Having said that, we've got to be very, very careful about how our local police are behaving. And something that is incredibly disturbing and incredibly dangerous to the United States Constitution is taking place in American streets, where during these riots and these violent protests, you have police officers going rogue and kneeling, literally kneeling before rioters and protesters, literally kneeling, joining arms. It's one thing to be sympathetic to protesters, and let's draw this distinction right now. There's a big distinction between the protesters, most of whom have a legitimate and perfectly valid constitutional right to be there. If you want to sympathize with them, you can do it on your own time, officers. You can, when your shift is over, you can go stand in line and you can march with them. But to be a uniformed police officer and to be doing your duty standing watch, right, or trying to contain situations that have become incredibly volatile and anarchic, right? It's very difficult right now to determine the rioter from the protester, that the chaos that's ensued. You're a uniformed police officer and you're standing on duty. The fact that you would kneel down before protesters and rioters as a show of solidarity is a capitulation that undermines the Constitution. Your job is not to be sympathetic to one cause or another. Officers, your job is to stand ground and protect property and protect life and allow peaceful protesters to protest without being swept away or overcome by the violence of the rioters who've mixed in with the protesters. It is shameful and embarrassing. Again, as police officers, if you want to quit or you want to wait till your shift is over and go march, then do it, but not when you're in uniform. One of the things that you forget about history, if you think about what happened in the Nazi period, when you think about what happened with the Bolsheviks in 1917, police forces ended up abandoning government and abandoning the law, in this case in America, abandoning the constitutional principles. They swear oaths to uphold through the Constitution and the law when they become officers of the law. Back in places like Nazi Germany, the police gravitated and became part of the protest, the riots of the brown shirts in the street, right? This is what happens. You can't do that, however sympathetic you are. It is an undermining. Let me give you a parallel situation. What do you think would have happened in September of 2001, 9/11? That was by no means the first Islamic attack on American civilization, 9/11. You had all sorts of other ones, all sorts of shootings. You have rogue military officers shooting up a base in Texas. There were a number of attacks on American soil, the USS Cole, leading up to 9/11. What if after all of those attacks culminating in 9/11, groups of Americans protested and violently protested mosques, showed up before all the mosques in the country, and some people started burning and looting. Other people were screaming epithets. The police who were there to defend the Islamic people from these mobs, if they stood down and kneeled before the protesters, do you understand that those police officers would have been fired? If you had mobs of roving Christians trying to wreak vengeance on Islam for 9/11 and for the U.S. Cole and for myriad other attacks, and it turned into anarchy and lawlessness, and you couldn't tell the peaceful Christian protesters from the rabid ones who were burning and looting and pillaging and beating Muslim citizens. To be a police officer and to agree with the Christian protesters and to kneel before them would have been an act of treason against your country. You would have betrayed the country and the Constitution. You would have abandoned those minority Muslims to the wrath of a mob. You would never have done it. The country would never have stood for it. There would have been mass firings. There would have been huge retrainings. There would be outrage by every news media outlet out there, conservative and liberal. But see, that's a scenario that doesn't happen. Christians don't protest. Christians don't violently. Christians don't burn down buildings. Christians don't throw stones at people because they disagree with their worldview. And so, therefore, what happens here with the Floyd riots, explain to me what the difference is. As uniformed police officers who are on duty, when you bow the knee to the demands of the protesters and the rioters, you are doing exactly the same thing that those Christians in my scenario would have done. And you would never have done it for them or for any other aggrieved group whose legal right to protest has elided seamlessly with anarchy, violence, and absolute assault and battery and arson. It's a bad look. We support the American police. They are under tremendous stress. They're being used by pawns in the big Democrat cities where these riots are taking hold. It's not the fault of the police officers, but when you officers step across that line and you kneel and you walk in solidarity and you support the rioters and the protesters, you're the problem too. This has been the Liberty News Hour. As always, you can go to thenewamerican.com and jbs.org for more topics as well as more shows.